Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Arren Kimbel-Sannit, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's event. Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this debate. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in the debate. Candidates that have opted into the Clean Elections Clean Funding Program are required to participate, while traditional candidates are invited and encouraged to attend. Please note, candidates from both the Senate and House may be participating in the debate tonight. In this case, we have Seth Blattman, who is running for Senate in LD23, and Eric Kurland, who's running for the House in LD23, both Democrats. As the moderator, I will ensure that candidates have the opportunity to engage directly, in this case, not with their opponents, but with each other as fellow Democrats, hoping to change the tides in LD23, and I suppose as well as to their absent opponents in their respective races. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from voters and from myself. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state, soliciting questions for the candidates. And voters that are watching this live can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com, texting at 928-362-1062, or calling at 480-937-1297. Please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or for all candidates. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplication, speeches, or personal attacks. The debate is scheduled for 1 hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements, and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to each questions. I figured that we can do this a little bit more like a Q&A or a sort of panel discussion, since you guys are from the same party and are not running against each other. But we do want to keep in mind that we do want to have some sort of equality or equity in how much time you each get to speak. If you feel the need to respond, of course, you may do so. We'd like to keep things conversational. I may step in to redirect the conversation or limit the conversation for time management purposes. And we do remind everybody that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. As I said, we have Eric Kurland running as a Democrat for House in Legislative District 23, and his comrade in the Democratic Party, Seth Blattman, running for Senate in that same district. We will begin with opening statements, beginning in alphabetical order by last name. So that is Mr. Blattman. Your opening statement, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Blattman. I'm running for State Senate in LD23. And I grew up in this district. I grew up in Scottsdale. I went to Chaparral High School, which is a couple miles down the road. I went to ASU. I got my MBA from UCLA, and after that, I returned home to take over running the family business, which, coming out of the Great Recession, like many small businesses, had fallen on rough times. Needed new leadership. So I came home and provided that leadership. We've hired some great people over the years so that we're doing much better now. It's the responsibility I feel to my family business is similar to the responsibility I now feel to my state. I love Arizona, just like I love my family's business. I grew up with a strong affinity for both of these two things. And, I see a state right now that's not living up to its full potential. Much like my family's business, we have the great bare bones of making a tremendous state, but we're not quite getting there. Bottom 5 in education. That's why I'm running on funding education, bringing higher quality jobs here to Arizona, and reforming government. And I ask for your vote for State Senate in LD23. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Eric Kurland, your turn. Opening statement, please.
Thank you, Arren, Seth, and to the viewers out there. I came out to Arizona to attend ASU, where I received a degree in finance under the guise that I would return to New York and make a killing on Wall Street. Somewhere along that path, I decided I wanted to make a difference rather than make money. Because I was a troubled child, there was a second grade teacher named Mrs. Cass who just changed my life. She was my superhero, and I wanted to become somebody's Mrs. Cass. So I went back to get a degree in elementary education, and I've never looked back. As a first-year teacher at Pima Elementary, I met my beautiful wife, Carrie, who she was substituting for a fifth grade teacher next door. And lo and behold, we were married a few months later, and we've made our home in Scottsdale ever since. As a career teacher, I have dedicated 25 years to public service, helping our kids learn and grow in Scottsdale's Title I schools. Perhaps one of my best claims to fame is that I played lacrosse as a Sun Devil and then helped start youth lacrosse as one of the first 4 coaches in 1999. And really, through all these years, my wife and I have only ever wanted to make a difference in the lives of children. But it seems every year it became tougher and tougher to get the resources necessary to meet those needs. So after witnessing firsthand the years of disastrous cuts to our children's schools, this decision to take my public service to the Capitol was the logical next step. Now, education is my priority, but there are so many issues that need real leadership. You're going to hear about those this evening. And again, I thank you for joining us. I truly believe that a representative is not just a job title. It's more of a job description. It's a promise. And the stakes right now are just too high and the country just too divided to continue with this lack of leadership, this lack of representation. My name is Eric Kurland. I was really looking forward to a spirited debate, but now it's just going to be a discussion. I hope at the end that I can earn your trust and perhaps earn your vote. Thanks, Arren.
Right. Thank you, guys. We'll begin now, I think, with a way that we can kind of get at how you would provide an alternative to the incumbent Republican representation in this district, which in the House is John Kavanagh, and if he is victorious, Joseph Chaplik, and the previous incumbent Jay Lawrence, in the Senate, Michelle Ugenti-Rita. I think one way to kind of get at that is if we were to go into the legislative session, which is a request that Democrats and some Republicans are making for different reasons, what would be some initiatives that you would support or propose immediately or in soon after getting there to help the state continue to fight the coronavirus and mount some sort of economic recovery? And how would that differ from how you think the Republicans would handle that if in your shoes? We'll begin with Mr. Blattman again, in alphabetical order.
Sure. So, I mean, COVID-19, as a state, we have not handled it well, to say the least. A month ago, we were the #1 place in the world for COVID. And that's hard for me to conceive of what that means. Every country, every state, we were the #1 place in the world. And that's because, our governor decided to play politics instead of, putting public health first. And what's that led to is both a situation where our economy isn't doing great and public health crisis is still going rampant. Strong leadership, putting the public health crisis first, addressing that would have allowed for a strong economy. So once in office, we need a plan, and that's what we lacked when we opened up the state. We need a plan for testing. We need a plan for contact tracing. We need a plan for quarantining. People should be wearing masks. People should be social distancing. And it's the total lack of a plan. It's the playing politics that has gotten Arizona into a place that no other state envies.
Eric, do you have any thoughts?
I've always got thoughts, Arren. First of all, I think that I want to say that Doug Ducey, at very first blush, did pretty well. He was following the science. He was pretty decisive. He was including everybody. And then somewhere along the way, he went off the rails. I think it was when people started storming the Capitol, or maybe it was when the president came to town. But we went from 0 to 100, it seems, rather than making progress to a place where we can all thrive. Now, as a pandemic has hit us, right, and everybody talks about once in 100 years, it's really the greatest opportunity for us to get together and work with those people in other parties. We have in Arizona no political party with more than 38% of the population. Basically, everyone, the Democrats, the Republicans, and the independents, are above 30%. So if you're just going to stick to what your party wants to do, you're ignoring 2/3 of the electorate. We have a lot of good ideas out there. What I think should have happened is they should have gone back into session to talk about how to help schools reopen. I know that we talk about the economy and how we can get that going again. Well, if we were using the time wisely when we had the time, we could have put money behind it. And I'm not talking about the $50 million from the CARES Act. I'm talking about something from the actual rainy day fund to actually put in sanitation stations outside of every one of our classrooms, to make sure that we hired enough people so that we can run those schools for longer hours with cleaner and more sanitation in between sessions, so we can deal with the most vulnerable rather than leaving it up to everybody at their own device. We needed leadership. Leadership was lacking. And quite frankly, I am surprised that the two parties couldn't get together and work on some solutions.
One thing I'm interested in, one of the incumbents in this district, Senator Ugenti-Rita, has joined with some Republicans in calling for legislation to sort of limit Ducey's emergency powers, either to end the emergency declaration as is, or in a more general sense, change requirements relating to oversight for how long a governor can declare a declaration before needing approval from the legislature, et cetera. Democrats in the legislature don't seem to see this as an issue, but I can see why there would be some Democrats who might. I mean, especially considering that there are essentially 2 years left of a Republican governor and a chance at a Democratic majority in the legislature. Do you think that you guys have any common ground with Republicans on the issue of oversight over the governor and his emergency powers, or do you agree with some in Democratic leadership that basically we should be given all the power that they need or desire in order to combat this virus? We'll begin with Eric this time.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to be careful because the person who is in charge now won't be in charge in 2 years. So we have to look at things from the other side of the coin, right? So if I'm a Democrat and I'm saying, well, this isn't good if a Republican has this power, would I be saying the same thing if a Democrat was in charge? Would I be saying the same thing if it was a Democrat-run legislature? In this instance, I probably would be saying the same thing. I don't think any one position should have too much in the way of power. We have checks and balances for a reason. I just worry that we have a choice of a lesser of two evils. I don't even think the governor trusts the far right wing of his party to do what's right by the state. So I think right now in a pandemic, we need people to come together. Unfortunately, the people that are knocking down the governor's door saying, please give us a special session, are doing it for their own political purposes. And I think that's wrong.
And so, basically, you maybe agree with the idea in theory as someone who respects the limited powers of each branch, but now, because of the strategic alliances, you would have to make it wouldn't be practical.
Yeah, so you can take it a step further, and you can look at how there's such a lack of trust among members down in the House, right? So in 2018, when I ran the first time, going in, it was 35-25, the membership, Republicans to Democrats. And the Republicans have had control of the House for over 50 years, right? When we went to 31-29, I really thought that that would cause people with just a one vote difference to get together and work on things. But it actually turned out that there was less than 10% of the bills actually heard were Democrat bills. So it turned out that the Republicans only counted to 31 with the letter R. That then gets to a point where we actually are in a position where we need to work together and there's no trust. So one of the things I plan on doing when I first get down there is to start building relationships, get to know people where they are and understand where they're coming from. We have a lot of good ideas. I'm smart enough to know that I don't know everything. And so I look forward to mending those fences.
Seth, let's get you in here. What are your thoughts on this subject?
Sure. So, the legislature has a role. I mean, checks and balances are a cornerstone to our democracy. But in a pandemic, this is a prime example of when the executive branch should shine. You mentioned my opponent being one of the main, most vocal critics, saying that we need to end the emergency declaration, saying that legislature needs to be back in session. The thing is with my opponent, to say that it's political. She's saying something because it sounds good. It's not going to lose her any votes. It might gain her votes, saying the executive is bad, the legislature is good. But if she actually had to make a decision, what is her decision? because I've asked her on Twitter. I've read all her statements, and she keeps going to like procedural things, saying, the legislature should do this, or the role of government is that. But she never answered the question: if you were in charge, or if you had the power, once back in session, what do you plan to do? Do you plan to require masks? Do you plan to enhance testing? And I don't know that she has a plan in the least, because she's been in the legislature. She's a career politician, 10 years, since her 20s. And, all she knows how to do is play politics, and doesn't really think, like, if I actually had to make a decision, what is in the best interest of the people of Arizona?
Got it. On the subject of your opponent in this race, neither of the incumbents who made it out of the primaries showed up tonight, as I mentioned kind of at the top. One question we had from the audience asks you guys to speculate a little bit why you think they didn't appear, and why you think it's important, or if you think it's important for them to be here, and if so, why. We'll begin with Seth.
My opponent, Michelle Ugenti-Rita, is an elected official. She has a responsibility to attend this debate. She has a responsibility to her constituency to answer their questions. Basically she's hiding. She thinks she can go ahead and win without having to answer any tough questions. Because if tough questions were to be asked of her, she doesn't have any good answers. What she's done with her time in the legislature has served nobody but herself and maybe her largest donors. But there's no thought of what is in the best interest of the people. She really, knows how to play politics and not much else. And, the fact that you're a public servant means you need to answer the questions of the voters. And she's can't even do that courtesy for them.
Eric?
Joseph, you want to talk about this one? No. Joseph doesn't want to talk. He's off camera. It's amazing. Here we are. We can join this debate from the comfort of our own homes. We could be sitting in shorts and a nice shirt, really comfortable. And we can talk to the voters about what is important to Arizona, what's important to our residents. So I think it's a direct dereliction of duty. Now, I'll give John Kavanagh a pass. John Kavanagh served for a very long time. We kind of know where he stands. I still think he should have come out and played. But Joseph, Mr. Chaplik, I will call him, if I was to speculate why he's not here, I think he's like George Bush used to say, all hat and no cattle, right? So he's got a lot of good pictures out there, but there aren't many policies or words behind the pictures. So it's kind of like the emperor has no clothes. I think if he was to come here today, he'd have to talk about all of his arrests. He would have to talk about all of his lawsuits. And I don't think he wants to talk about that. I think he just wants to run with the letter R and stay low.
Just to add to what Eric said, I don't know anything about Joe Chaplik. He's currently the nominee, the Republican nominee for the House, and I know nothing about him. I've seen lots of signs, and that's great, but I have no idea what his positions are. I think he is trying to skate by on the letter R next to his name. Ideally, I would know he's trying to represent me. I would know what he stands for, and I have no idea.
Well, I think it's disqualifying for a person that comes here and, has lived less than a decade or whatever it is, and nobody knows anything about him. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to take him at his word in that he was traveling and he was on a flight or something, because I know there's internet connections around the state, there's around the country. We can come on to this type of a Zoom from any place, even on your flight, they have it. So I'm going to take him at his word and say that him and perhaps Ramsey went for some trip where they couldn't get service. I'll tell you what, I will debate Joseph for the good of the people. We can go to either the Tea Party meeting, we can go to the LD23 Republican meeting, we can sit on rocks in the middle of the Salt River. I don't care. Joe Chaplik, you ring me up, we'll talk about the issues. The people deserve to know where you stand.
All right. I think we've let you guys have your fun on that subject for now. Appreciate you answering the question. I want to talk a little bit about elections legislation. Again, this is something near and dear to one of the incumbent Senator Ugenti-Rita's heart. She has championed legislation, increasing oversight, for example, by the governor's office over the Clean Elections Commission, limiting initiatives to a single subject. and other such measures. Where do you guys stand on the sort of divide issues of elections, integrity, ballot? Can you hear me?
You froze up for a second.
Okay. On issues of elections integrity, ballot initiatives, things of that nature that have all kind of been in the sights of Republican lawmakers like Senator Ugenti-Rita in the past, where do you think that you should sort of steer policy-wise on those subjects? And we'll begin with Seth.
Yeah, so I mean, Ugenti-Rita, while in office, has focused on one subject, and that's making it harder for people to vote, putting unnecessary barriers in front of people. Pieces of her legislation, she's tried to pass include trying to kick people off of the permanent early voter list, trying to make it so we can't drop off our mail-in ballots the day of the election. I mean, even during COVID, she wants people to go to the polls as opposed to moving towards a mail-in election, because in her mind, a mail-in election might result in more people voting. Her entire tenure in office has been dedicated to making it harder for everyone to vote. And I know that there's not, the majority of my district is not calling her on a regular basis, begging her to do this. This is her looking out for her own politics, the politics of her own party. And no one's asking for this. For myself, though, once in office, the first bill I would introduce is a bill that would be based roughly on HR 1 at the federal level, which deals with election security, campaign finance, and voting rights. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy. It's the most basic thing that defines a democracy is voting. So making it easier for people to vote, not harder.
Got it. Eric, do you want to chime in on this?
Sure. Unless Joseph wants to go. So I think we have to look to our county recorders, right? We have 15 county recorders, well divided between Republicans and Democrats, and each one of those county recorders have come out against what she's trying to do. I think what we can say is Michelle Ugenti-Rita is probably running for the Secretary of State in 2022, and she started it 2 years ago, and she's going to continue on. I'm going to take her at her word and say that she really feels that there could be some problems with elections. But I would say, would you come to the table and talk to people, bring your evidence. Don't bring the boogeyman, bring the data, and you'll see there is no data. Back in the 2018 election when Senator Sinema won, we know that people delivered their mail-in ballots at the location because they were scared to go through the post office. They wanted to wait to the end. So it was delivered at the polling place. The reason why those elections were slow to return was because they have to verify the ballots. So I think we can all agree that every vote should matter, every person should vote, and everybody should be informed about voting. So that's kind of why you're here, Arren, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the people. We can inform them of the issues, but I think there's a real problem when you're striking at democracy in the way of just getting a political foot up. So.
The next voter question here is about healthcare. They discussed the lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act. It's now reaching the U.S. Supreme Court. There was Senate legislation this year, SB 1397, that says insurers would have to give Arizonans a policy, but not necessarily an affordable or comprehensive policy. The voter asks, if the ACA fails as a result of this lawsuit, what role could the Arizona legislature play in protecting Arizonans with pre-existing conditions? And we will begin with Seth.
Yeah, so if the ACA were to fail, which I don't think it will, it's become fundamental to healthcare in our country. In fact, I think it's going to be expanded. But if it were to fail, the Arizona legislature needs to act to protect people with pre-existing conditions, which is a major tenet of the ACA. I mean, we've expanded Medicaid and covered millions more people, hundreds of thousands probably in our state, with the ACA. And, if the ACA were to go away, which I think would be at the, I think most people in America would hate at this point, Arizona would need to make up the difference. And that means making sure everyone has affordable access to quality healthcare in our state.
Eric, healthcare, you want to get in?
Sure. First of all, the healthcare that we have through our employers for the general isn't so good. My wife is a teacher. I have healthcare through the school district with her. And the other day, she got stung by a scorpion and actually had a bad reaction, had to go to the hospital for anti-venom. That little part of putting on a towel outside the pool is going to cost us about $5,000. And if I wasn't a finance major and had money put away, we would have been in a world of hurt. So what I think that, if anything, this pandemic has taught us is that anybody can lose a job, anybody can lose insurance, and you shouldn't have to be destitute and bankrupt for something that is you can't even prevent. So I think we ought to look to people who have been in the healthcare arena for a long time, people like Kelly Butler. What I'd like to see is the ability to buy into the state system, to be able to lower costs, improve outcomes. And I just don't see why people are working against that. I thought that my partners across the aisle would be for competition. So open it up, have everybody compete like that, but allow people to buy into the state system. Allow people to pool together to reduce risk.
Great, thank you. Now, one thing I'm interested in hearing from you, Eric, is you talked at the beginning about the importance of building relationships, and but I think you would not shy away from the fact that you were sort of running as someone who was pragmatic. Yet, even if there is a Democratic majority in both chambers, you have just highlighted the tendencies of the GOP that are not exactly very collaborative in nature, and you'll be dealing with a Republican governor in the ninth floor. So with someone who is kind of running on this idea of pragmatism, of working with both sides, obviously this is a Republican district, you guys are Democrats. Mm-hmm. What are some actual actions or skills that you could take or employ in order to make some of these things a reality, even if there is a double legislative majority for the Democrats?
That is good stuff. And let's talk about how things can be different. The most important vote you take as a legislator, is before any bills are heard. It's for the speaker, right? It's for leadership. And right now we have one party that has put speakers in place or leadership in place that has really squashed good bills. So I'll give you an example of a bill in a moment, but what's going to happen is I'm going to work to elect leadership that will then work with both sides. I think one thing I've asked of leadership, whoever I vote for must have an open budget process. And I would really like to request that the budget committees, not just the budget, but all committees are represented in scale to the amount of members, right? So if it's 29-31, then there's not going to be a 7-4 split. It's got to be a 6-5 split. And I would actually like to see that the vice chair be from the opposing party. I think that we can, as adults, have adult conversations and decide in this time, in this era, right now, to work together to move Arizona forward. And here's what makes me excited about representing Scottsdale and Fountain Hills. Even though Republicans outnumber Democrats by almost 2-1, every time the schools go out, hat in hand, every 5 years for an override, that they would then tax themselves, it passes by double digits. We're not far off on things. I think we have to have an investment in education rather than in incarceration, right? I think everybody in my district, we're a lot of college-going kids. That cost of college has skyrocketed. It used to be that we paid twice as much on higher education than we did on incarceration. Now it's flipped. That's a bad priority. And I'll give you one other thing. There should be local control. I think the people I serve have been impacted by these short-term rentals. And I see myself working with John Kavanagh. I'll give him credit. He voted against that bill that took away the local control. He voted against it. I would like him to stop tinkering around the edges. I'd like to partner with him to do a full repeal because my neighbors know my community and I elect my neighbors to deal with that. So Safford is very different from Scottsdale. Ajo is very different than Tucson. I mean, we should be able to trust our local officials to make those decisions. So I think there's room for us to work together. I don't think we go and have this extreme agenda. I think we have to be the adults in the room My friends across the aisle haven't proven that they're up to it. I think it's time for us to take a turn. So when we elect that new speaker, there's going to be this vast middle that wants to work together. And then you're going to have the extremists on the left and the right, kind of on the bottom of the bell curve. You're going to have about 40 people in that chamber, about 2/3 willing to work together.
I guess I see the underlying sociological sort of logic or model that you're building this assumption on, but as someone who's been on the floor there, and you know, even just use the example of this this venue that we're in right now, there is no attempt at being conciliatory or collaborative with the other side, which didn't materialize. So what makes you think that you know, this is one of the debates the Democratic Party is having all the time right now, which is what is the argument for conciliation when the other side doesn't appear willing? And who's to say that even in the minority that will change next year? It depends on who ends up in leadership in that party.
That's true. And I'll tell you where it's not going to change. It's not going to change if we continue down the same path. So I understand where you're a little bit colored on this idea, and it's a little dark because we've had the House in Republican control for over 50 years. But there was a time where you'd be able to argue on the floor and then go out and have a beer. That's what it's going to work back to.
But why is that? But why is that important? Why do voters care if their lawmakers are having beers with lawmakers in the other party?
Yeah, it's not a matter of us having beer. It's us. It's a matter of talking about our constituents and understanding. It's listening, right? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally. When I was the president of the Scottsdale Education Association, we went out of a dark time. And we had a new superintendent. We decided to work together, and we took up what was called interest-based bargaining, where we identified interests and we put them out singularly. So we might both have an interest with campaign finance reform, or we might both have an interest on funding education. We work to achieve that interest, right? We have measurements where we say it must be doable, it must be legal, it must be something that our constituents could relate to. I mean, there's different measures, but it's a matter of getting out of the model that has failed us and getting, if not now, when?
Seth, we'll get to you in 1 second, but just because of the makeup of the House, I want to stay on this subject for a little bit longer. You know, you mentioned leadership. While neither House Minority Leader Fernandez or Representative Espinoza will admit as such publicly, I think they're both sort of widely rumored to be running for Speaker, or at the very least House Minority Leader.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
You have heard that. I'm wondering if you would volunteer your position on the two, and regardless of that, if you could describe what kind of attempts have been made to, you know, sway your vote either way, and kind of how you found those interactions to be.
Well, that really is a great question. You'll put me on the spot. And the reason why you're asking that is, you know, that this seat is very, very flippable, despite the numbers. And I take that very seriously. So I have been approached by a lot of people. I'll say what I am for. If you haven't gotten already, I wouldn't consider myself so much a progressive as I am a pragmatist. I take a look as what we did as teachers, right? So we have what's in teaching called scaffolding. You might have an idea of where you want to go, but you can't get there without going through the steps. So for instance, the view at the top of the house might be a wonderful view, but you can't just jump up there. You got to take a ladder, and you got to bring, you know, somebody holds the ladder. You need to get there. So what I'm saying to you is, I am a pragmatist. I need to work on creating jobs. I need to work on increasing the availability of healthcare. I need to work on increasing the availability of affordable college. We have to go back to funding our community colleges, our seed corn there, and we have to have some campaign finance reform. And so
has Leader Fernandez, to the extent that she is capable of doing things as House Minority Leader, has she failed to live up to those ideals, do you think?
I don't think she's failed to live up to ideals. I think leadership is a very tough position. I admire Leader Fernandez. I'm going to listen to both people, or whoever those people are that are running for leadership. And as I've said to a lot of people who have actually, you know, been around me, this is what I stand for. If that's what you like, great, I'm in it. If you want to change my mind, please come with some facts, come with some data, tell me how it's going to be different. I'm not looking to be wined and dined. I'm not looking to make this my career. I'm looking to make a change for Arizona. And I firmly believe a change in Arizona happens when you work together with the other side. That's what I believe.
Great, thanks. And just for some context for the voters, leadership in both parties is up for grabs at the end of every 2 years. Democrats are sort of fighting between two competing visions, or two or more competing visions, as they are on the precipice potentially of a majority for the first time in many, many, many years. As a reminder, this is the debate in LD23, sponsored by the Citizens Clean Election Commission. We host debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues, and vote informed. Voters that are watching this debate live can submit a question at any time via email at debates@kc-a.com, via text at 928-362-1062, or on the phone at 480-937-1297. Please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or all candidates. In this case, we have Seth Blattman running for Senate as a Democrat in LD23, and his counterpart in the House, Kurland, hoping to unseat Representative John Kavanagh or defeat Joseph Chaplik, a Republican, running for the open seat, or running for what was once Representative Jay Lawrence's seat. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, personal attacks. Now, that all being said, we just talked a long time about House leadership. We want to go over to the Senate now. We have a question that I think is sort of district specific. I always like those. We all seem to agree, this voter says, that our city roads need repair. Add on to that, do you think that some Republican support to increase road funding measures like the gas tax, and what can you do to break through that? We will at long last get to you. Sorry about the wait. Please go ahead.
So listen, as a state, we need to invest in infrastructure. There's no doubt. But I'm going to use this as an opportunity to answer the last question, which was, why bipartisan?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, Eric and I are both looking to represent all the people of LD23, all the people of Arizona. We're not looking to represent Democrats. We're not looking to represent left-leaning people. We're looking to represent every single person of this district. And that means working together. That means including the Republicans in any piece of legislation, whether we're in the majority in both houses or just one. I mean, I understand the question in that we've all become a bit jaded and, frankly, a lot of cynical of politics now and see it just through a bipartisan lens. But I think we're looking to go back to the days of working together. That's how you get legislation that represents everyone. And the question started on the repeal of the ACA, and frankly, if the ACA is repealed, there's no plan after ACA. There's no replacement plan. So it will be incumbent upon Republicans and Democrats to work together to figure out a healthcare situation, because we will actually need to deal with a real situation there. Bipartisanship is possible. Working together is possible. And I'm looking to represent everyone in LD23.
So what does the real solution look like in practice? I mean, it's one thing to be nicer to each other on the floor or to be more congenial. That's not necessarily a strategic. That's not a tact. So taking an example, like at this point, it doesn't really matter whether you want to talk about healthcare or you want to talk about an issue like road funding. But what is the actual bipartisan path forward look like? Like how do you do what has largely been avoided here, barring a couple exceptions, for decades? Because it's certainly not going to be as simple as saying, well, we can't make derogatory remarks on the floor anymore.
Sure. I think people, and I mean all people, are tired of living, every 4 years, like we feel like we live in someone else's state or someone else's country based on what party's in power. And I think right now our current election systems result in extremes. I think the current representatives of the Republican Party are further to the right than Republicans in general. I think most people are moderate. I think by the definition of the word moderate, most people are moderate. They all fall in the middle for the most part, and that needs to be represented in legislation. In order to get to a place where our body is more represented, more representative of the people, I think that goes to what I brought up initially, which is bills related to HR1 and small d democracy issues. I think we need to look at the way we are electing our representatives. I think we should look at things like campaign finance reform, like getting dark money out of politics. And by making systemic reforms, I think that's how we get to a place where we're electing the type of people, the right type of people in the first place that care about things like paving roads and care about things like funding education. And this will create a more moderate group of legislators that can actually work together on issues.
So I'm interested then to kind of address the counterfactual, I suppose, if you would, which is, there are members of the party who believe that it's not cynical to not openly embrace bipartisanship. It is a truer expression of your identity as a political being. And, there are some Democrats, I think, who don't see the value in working extensively with Republicans and recognize that there's a fraction in their constituency that is deeply liberal, progressive, or even left populist, and that they need to listen to those voters as well. Obviously, LD23 maybe doesn't have that same kind of complexion, but as a state and as a party, there is a progressive shift. How earnestly that's embraced and how performatively depends on the person, but you can't deny it either way. How would you sort of listen to those impulses, or do you even listen to those impulses when we look at things like the Black Lives Matter movement, or more locally, organizations like Lucha, which are very progressive, very active in outside legislature? How do you relate to groups like that?
I talk to Democrats on a regular basis. I listen to people, everyone. You're not representing just your party. I have the ideals of my party on a lot of issues, but I am meant to represent Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, and that's what we're there to do. And if it's a moderate district, which my district is, we govern as moderate. That's how I feel about the issue. And there really are things in place that currently put us in a place where infighting is just like a course of business. When we need to actively be working to make these things lessen, so that the legislation is more representative of what the people actually want, which I feel like is missing these days.
Eric, do you have any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
I do, and I think you know what? I could be all wrong, Arren. This could all be wrong, but I'll tell you what. When we win, I'll know I'm on the right path, because I will know that my constituents do not want us to have a funding of 49th in the nation for education. They will not accept that. They don't accept that in our area. We will not have that anymore. We will not have the second highest class sizes. We will not have the worst counselor to student teacher ratios. They don't want that. We are through. I mean, I could work with Walt Blattman right now on sentencing reform, because we're one of 3 states in the nation to require 85% of a sentence to be served no matter what the offense. And that's just ridiculous. We can come together and say, you know what, we have to have taxpayer oversight and accountability of our dollars. That's a Republican thing. So what we're talking about is not these heavy lifts. We're talking about people's lives. They care about their family. They want to be able to create an Arizona where you can grow up, get a job, live, learn, work, and then retire. We have it all. We have the mountains, we have the streams, we have the lakes, we have all the natural beauty. All we need is an infrastructure and education that supports high-paying wages, and we can get somewhere. And I think people want that.
I think the point you made about Representative Blattman, who, for the viewers' purposes, is a Republican from LD6 who's been active on the House side on issues of criminal justice reform. It's an interesting sort of thought because Representative Blattman, despite working frequently with Democrats on issues of criminal justice reform, has earned consternation from Democrats and I think from the general public for making comments, espousing a really severe conservative social viewpoint on issues like abortion and homosexuality, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a certain point in which you feel like you can't work on someone from the other party because their views on an issue are so go against so fundamentally either the values of your party or you personally?
Hey, I don't have to like Walt Blackman. When I'm elected, I have to work with Walt Blackman. Doesn't mean we have to agree on where we are in social justice. I mean, I think it's just ridiculous that you don't have equal rights for everybody. I think that's an economic loser as well as a loser in just the moral fiber of our state. But be that as it may, it means that we move forward on issue.
Using social justice as the example here. How you sentencing reform is a social justice issue, right? So how can you work on issues, television is also a social justice issue, some of the other things that Representative Black believes in would seem contrary. I know this is not so much a really practical conversation anymore, but I think it's still informative for voters just to kind of get a sense of where you are at ideologically.
Well, do you think that sentencing reform has to be paired with equal rights? I mean, they don't. I think if we deal with that one subject, we'll be fine. There's not going to be a poison pill going in there. He's very passionate about sentencing reform. And him and I can believe in sentencing reform for different reasons. But the idea is to move Arizona forward.
And you make progress in any area.
Walk, right? So let's take that first step.
Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you can make progress in any area by working with the other side, you absolutely take advantage of that situation. You never compromise your ideals, but you absolutely work with people when and where you can. But what Eric, keeps bringing it back to, whether it's, justice for all, or whether it's education, or whether it's healthcare or infrastructure. These are the things that Arizonans care about. And as a small business owner, these are the things that we need in place because having otherwise is bad for business. Being in the bottom, being 48th in the nation in per pupil spending is bad for business. Being not in a great position in healthcare is bad for business. Being lacking infrastructure is bad for business. We need to fix these things so that we can improve the economy of Arizona. Meanwhile, the current legislatures view education as an expense and not an investment, which when as a business owner, I know it is an investment.
So I'm curious because you guys are obviously of a very different mind than the lawmakers that the same voters that you're courting elected. Any election in Arizona, especially in the Phoenix area, is rests largely on independents a lot of the time, and obviously you have to cut into that group. What makes you think, and this is a question that a voter is asking, that the same people who voted for someone who is at the right flank of her party, like Senator Ugenti-Rita, can be convinced that these sort of bread and butter issues that you're talking about are issues that are important to them and ones that are important to them to the point that they would consider voting, for a Democrat, a pragmatic one or an ideological one, regardless. It's obviously still a significant change. What kind of are you seeing data-wise or anecdotally that tells you that this district is ready for that? And how do you win over that voter that voted for Ugenti-Rita in the past? Seth, sorry.
Sure. So, frankly, Michelle Ugenti-Rita does not represent the people of this district anymore. She is, extreme. She's far right. The people of my district are not far right extremists. They're moderates. They're the conservatives in my district are traditional conservatives that believe in small government and free trade and lower taxes, but they do not buy in to a brand of extreme republicanism that they see on TV. And when someone like a small business owner or a lifelong educator come along with moderate point of view, saying that we are actually interested in representing all the people, actually improving the lives of all the people of Arizona, when I talk to Republicans, they vote for me. Right now, I just feel like we're not represented.
What are voters saying about representation? What are some of the things that you're hearing, and how, aside from just presenting a slightly more liberal point of view, how can you actually be more effective?
Sure. So, and a previous question, we have seen polling that independents are breaking for the generic Democrat over the generic Republican, but that's besides the point. Like, we've actually seen numbers that indicate the district is moving in the right direction. We've seen CD6 moving this direction the whole time, which we're located in. But can you repeat your question? Because I got distracted there. The thing about the current representation.
Yes, I forgot myself. What are voters telling you about how they view the representation is failing them? And what can you do to actually be a better civil servant, a better representative, instead of just someone who presents a different worldview?
So for myself, it's remembering the words public service. You're there to serve the public. You're not there to serve yourself. You're not there to serve your political party. You're not there to serve your largest donors. And that's what we've seen by at least my opponent, Ugenti-Rita. She's focused on really one issue the entire time on the legislature. Again, nobody is asking her to focus on this issue. Maybe a few people are concerned about it, but she is doing this for herself, for the extreme right ideologues of her party, and for her largest donors. Frankly, while in office, she has done very little legislate to actually improve the lives of the people of her district or that state, and that's a promise I will make to voters LD23.
Eric, what makes you think that the Republicans of this district, the predominantly college-educated white suburbanites of LD23, why are they ready to elect a Democrat such as yourself, and what can you bring to the table to be a better public servant aside from just a shift in ideology? Same question, basically.
Well, I think you have to do a lot more listening and a lot more visibility. Get out there to the community. We have had people who have never even seen or heard of their representatives before. I think so. That is one thing. But I want to talk about the possibilities, what could be. So my wheelhouse is education. What if we were to do something about that and we actually created a system in 20 years? What do we want to be in 20 years? And we can create a system actually that captures teachers so that they are here from hire to retire. Now, with education, half of them in the first, but David Berlin, legislative continuing this path of poverty where one of the 4 kids was up in poverty in Arizona. So, and then your 4 through 10, perhaps the state paid for part of their retirement buy-in, right? So the teacher pays 12%, the district pays 12%. What if the state was to pick up about 6 of that? Now they're vested in the state. They're here for the long haul. And then perhaps years 10 through 20, we give them an opportunity to go back and get a master's or some higher learning courses through the community colleges. And that kind of elevates them. And then we work with the K-12 Institute to train those years 20 and above into how to mentor the new teachers. And we give them health care after retirement until Medicare age, so that they're then mentoring those 1st through 3rd year teachers. Teachers don't want to leave the profession. They don't. But what we have put them up against has caused us to have over 2,000 classrooms without a certified teacher. That is unsustainable on a moral level and especially on an economic level. So, I mean, here are things that we could do. And like I said early on in the broadcast, our constituents have said that education is important from day one. They voted with their pocketbook.
This is another voter question, but I want to get it in because it's on the subject. What can you do as a lawmaker? I'm glad that you're getting into the specifics on plans. I'd like to hear from both of you. Respond to this question from a voter who asked basically what you could do to help fix or to help improve Scottsdale schools to help ensure that they have a successful recovery from the virus, and basically to ensure future funding and longevity and maybe some isolation if something like this were to happen again. And we'll go to Seth this time and then finish with Eric before we do closing statements.
Sure. So what I'm going to do once in the legislature is co-sponsor a bill that my good friend Eric Kurland will present, because like we've been talking about all the time, you defer to experts when you're not an expert on it. And the idea, when people think they're experts on everything, that leads to really bad outcomes. So I'm going to let my lifelong educator friend Eric tell you what he's going to be doing for education over the course of his term in office.
Okay, what is the Kurland plan? Let's hear it.
It's not the Kurland plan. I mean, it's actually to listen to science, right? We have to go with data. We only have one chance to open these schools, so we have to do it right. When you look at business right now, we have people that are on this binary choice. Either we open all the way or we're closed all the way. That's not sustainable. If you try to open a business now, you're going to have about half of the people that won't go out and use your business. You can't survive with 50% of the population out there actually shopping. So what we have to do is we have to put the resources behind and the ability to say, unless you reach these metrics, you cannot open, because there are no barriers in between these school districts of Paradise Valley, Cave Creek, Scottsdale, Fountain Hills. We get students that come to the Scottsdale schools from Fountain Hills. We get students that come from downtown Phoenix to Arcadia High School. So we can't afford to allow this to go up to individual school districts, because we do enjoy school choice and we have mobility amongst our kids. But we do have to put in measures, and we have to all come together and support those measures. So that's what I would expect leadership from the top. I would expect leadership from our House and our Senate. The simple things like wearing a mask, like sanitizing your hands, like social distancing. And learning with the most vulnerable populations, with those kids, we have to work at the youngest first, and then ultimately we're going to get I want to do something good.
Yeah.
I want to say this before I quickly adjourned. This fiscal year would be held harmless.
Yeah.
And that is huge. So kudos to all of them, because they have tried to change the funding. In fact, they did, from prior year's enrollment to current year's enrollment. And if we would have gone with that current year's enrollment, with half the kids not wanting to attend because their parents were scared they were going to get sick, to people actually coming down with a pandemic, we would have been in a world of hurt. So kudos to them.
Just a clarifying question, because I mean this legislation would not theoretically come now for several months, by which time schools may already start. We don't really know. I mean, lots of things could happen between now and then. So let's just assume that this is really a decision that is more forward-looking than what do we do right now. But how do we ensure that schools or that parents have come 6 months from now the confidence to send their kids back to school, so there's not an issue where we keep on having to tinker with the school finance formula every year? How do you ensure that long-term confidence and make lasting changes that can help ensure the stability of our public education system, not just in the pandemic, but kind of in general?
Well,
we assigned you a massive gargantuan task before you.
Yeah, but it's not that difficult. You're not going to fix it in a year. You have to look at aspirational, where do you want to be in 20 years? And you know that you're in competition with the other states around you. So maybe we benchmark our state and say, you know what, we're going to be 35th in the nation funding because that's the average of the states around us. And then we have, we bring in experts, we talk about what we want education to be. The bright side of funding it so poorly is we can build what we want it to be, right? We have this base, it's a very low base. We're $4 billion behind the actual average of the United States per year. We're not going to get it all back in a day, right? We're not going to get it all back in a year. But we have to have the conversation. So we have to look at the school funding mechanism. We have to get the business community to say, you know what, behind closed doors, you're saying education is important. We need you to come to the table. We need you to come and be partners. We need the real estate people to come to the table. We need the education experts to come to the table. We have to aspire to be better.
Great, thanks. In just a second, we will get our closing statements from our two candidates here. We have Seth Blattman running as a Democrat for Senate in LD23, his counterpart Eric Kurland running for that district's House seat. Also running in these respective races are Senator Michelle Ugenti-Rita in the Senate, Representative John Kavanagh in the House, and newcomer Joseph Chaplik, all of whom are Republicans, did not make it out tonight. We've been hearing that there might have been some buffering issues, so just as a note, the recording will be available through the Clean Election Commission's YouTube page. In case you had any viewing issues, you can check it out there. It is coming up on 7 o'clock, so I will give each of you a brief opportunity to make a closing statement. We will begin in alphabetical order with Seth Blattman. Please go ahead.
So I by no means want to harp on my opponent, but the fact is she no longer represents LD23. Today she organized a rally against Scottsdale School District, saying that we need to send our kids back, basically with no precautions. She's been on the wrong side of COVID the entire time. Like I said, she wants to send people to the polls during COVID. They went to the Donald Trump rally with their kids with no mask on, no mask rally in Scottsdale the next day, has been encouraging people not to wear masks from her platform as a state senator. So I just can't explain to you how much this is not representative of the very intelligent people of my district. But when it comes to a choice, the voters of my district now have an option of a small business owning Democrat, of a Democrat with an MBA, a Democrat that's a capitalist. And I think this is a choice that they're going to easily make over their current representation. I come from a family business, and in that business, you look after every dollar as if it was one of your own, because it is one of your own. I'll bring that same mentality to the state legislature. I'll bring my practical experience to the state legislature. I look very much to representing all the people of the 20 years.
I found out our children just suffer. We're going to make that happen. Bring back the power to the people that are closest to the issue. I look forward to serving everybody. If you haven't heard what you needed to hear or a question wasn't answered, go to Kurland23, Kurland 23.com, and go ahead and ask one. We can set up a time where I can talk to you on the phone, or perhaps a Zoom just like this, or even a socially distanced coffee. And for my opponent, Joseph Chaplik, I would say to you, we'll have a debate on your terms, wherever you want to, whenever it's convenient, when you're back in town. That's it, man. I really appreciate your time. We've talked before. Seth, thanks for coming out. This was a hoot and a half.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for showing up. I'm glad that everybody had a hoot and a half at the very least. I hope our viewers can say the same. With that, thank you so much for watching the Citizens Clean Election Commission debate for LD23. Enjoy your evenings. Good night. Thank you.
Good job.